very good morning and welcome to Media Monitor, the show that monitors and evaluates media coverage of leading stories of the week and puts the media in the spotlight. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. We are live right here on SABC News Channel 404, Africa's news leader. In our lineup today, we look at the media coverage of the inauguration of President Jacob Zuma, the appointment of premiers, the ongoing platinum strike. We interrogate the media as to why the Gorky story is only making headlines only when footage of his wife pleading for his release goes viral. We analyze the Malawi elections, the endless attacks in Nigeria, and lastly, the protests in Brazil before the 2014 FIFA World Cup. To give us an analysis on media coverage of these stories, let's welcome Mr. Julian Rademeyer, who is editor at africacheck.org, Mr. Shoni Makari, CEO at Flow SA, and of course, Mr. Wellington Radu, head of programs at Media Monitoring Africa, and of course, founder of the Gift of the Givers, Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman. And on the line, we're hoping to be joined by Christopher Dube, editor at Diski 360, and lastly, Xavier Skunika, Africa editor at CAJ News Agency. Remember, you can call us to give us insight on the stories that you think deserve to be covered by the media, but were omitted on. Plus 2711 714 6857, 714 6843, 714 6857. You can also share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. Very good morning to you. Good morning. In our top story today, the mine strike has claimed one more life after a mine worker, allegedly a new member, was killed in Sondela informal settlement near Rustenburg. The ripple effects of the 4-month strike in the Platinum Belt is already hampering growth and threatening efforts to narrow South Africa's current account deficit. The marathon strike has left breadwinners penniless and children having to make do with one meal a day from school. This week's decision by Judge Hilary Rabkin-Naika to persuade Labour and platinum mining companies to enter into mediation has brought some hope. However, critics say that the two parties have already gone to the CCMA for mediation without getting any closer to a resolution. Now, panel, a very good morning to you and thank you so much for joining us right here on Media Monitor.
Pleasure, thank you.
Now, panel, let's look at this. How has the coverage of the AMCU Platinum strike been so far? Let's start with you, Julian. How have you seen the coverage since the beginning of the strike up until now?
Well, I think it's been fairly mixed. I mean, I think we've seen some very good reporting. And an example of that would be the Sunday Times package from last week that looked at some of the key issues. But I think it's a story in many ways that has ebbed and flowed. We've had pockets of coverage. Starting way back when with the Marikana massacre and moving on from then, where the issues haven't been explored as they should have been. The situation hasn't been investigated. There was some controversy this week, for example, about the Star doing a lifestyle audit on Joseph Matunjwa. And not focusing, for instance, on the big shots in the mining companies, Amplats in particular, Lonmin, etc. So there has been some controversy around that. I would think that there would probably be more coverage, more in-depth coverage. We've in today's papers there is some, but it's quite limited. We're talking about a national crisis here, and a national crisis where government ministers, Susan Shabangu has been noticeably absent. And it's taken something like Judge Rabkin-Naika's decision. So she took a decision. She stepped in where governments failed to step in. And I think it was a very courageous decision. It certainly was, a precedent-setting decision in many ways.
Absolutely. And we've seen there's been quite a call for government to actually step in and facilitate. But we all know that the talks brokered at CCMA didn't amount to nothing. Now, Wellington, very interesting that Julian just mentioned that the Star did a lifestyle survey on Mr. Joseph Matunjwa. A miner actually called us last week and told us that, that Mr. Matunjwa was misleading the miners themselves and not representing the miners. Do you think that we've gotten enough of the miners' side of the story?
Look, this is always the case when it comes to reporting on those things. What you tend to see is that it's almost always from the point of business. So most of the coverage is from the point of business, and I think that underscores the need for us to have Labour reporters, because what you tend to see in this coverage is that media is running with the business side of things, how it costs the economy. But at the same time, I think what's important is to understand what is really happening on the ground, because often when you read different pieces and you hear different discussions, it's almost like they're talking totally different things.
Absolutely.
And you don't get to know what the truth is. And I think what's important is for us to have people who really look at it from a labor kind of perspective, not just necessarily the business side of things.
Mr. Makar.
Well, I think certainly while there's been some coverage of sort of the human interest angle
Other
of some
angles,
of the,
yes.
it has not been as in-depth as I would have liked to see. I mean, as you had earlier, there was a lifestyle audit, so to speak, of Mr. Mthunjwa, but we never saw the lifestyle audit of the CEOs of the big mining companies, which would be interesting to see how many Ferraris are parked in their garage while all of this is going on.
6 cars, 6 BMWs, and an array of bodyguards to come to meetings.
Absolutely. So, it would be interesting to see, how does the average miner lives. There was some coverage on television, but not as in-depth as I think one would like to see. So we can get to understand, really, is this 12.5 justifiable or not?
Now, Dr. Suleiman, thank you so much once again for joining us. Now, the gift of the givers was also quite in the media frenzy this week after, over the misunderstanding, of course, or the allegations of the handing out of the food parcels. Doctor, please set the record straight. People were saying that you are only handing out food parcels to AMCU members.
You know what? That's very, very surprising. We've got a history of 22 years, and we don't take sides with anyone. We only have where it's required. But I ask a very pertinent question. If we did that, did we do this in some clandestine way? Did we do it in an underground warehouse, behind closed doors, or in some way where nobody could see?
It was public.
Our work is always done in full view of all the media that are there. So could we hide behind the media and say, please, can you show me a slip who you belong to? They don't have time for things like that. And even AMCU themselves, these are not AMCU, these are people, everybody is not necessarily on the union there. So people who meet you on the ground, we said, look, are you guys doing this? They said, can you see for yourself, is anybody doing this here in the field? And they said, look, we make an announcement and 10,000 people suddenly turn up. They said, do we have time now to ask every 10,000 people, give us, who do you belong to? Women and children, can they belong to a union? I mean, there's thousands of them that turned up yesterday. It's impossible for anybody to know who they belong to. And everybody just stands in the line. What they were doing initially, they were taking numbers down, clock numbers, to say, because we can't give the same person twice.
Oh, yes.
But that system can't work unless you computerize it. Because you're going to deal with 10,000 people, who's going to cross-check manually for against 10,000 names? It's not possible. So that system is also not going to work. Because there's just too many hungry people.
Doctor, do you feel that the media was very swiftly active in actually setting the record straight about the fact that you were not just handing out parcels to AMCU members?
Well, the fact that they didn't really call me on the issue means they didn't
So
believe
they didn't clarify with you first?
No, they didn't believe it. They know it's because media travels with me. It's not like they for the first time
figure,
meeting.
yes.
The media knows how we operate. Quite often when they will speak on commentary, they will say, when we traveled with him, this is what we did and this is what we saw. So media didn't believe it. And some people saw it. And they were there. It's not like they were not there. They saw it for themselves, how we were operating. But yes, to answer your question, they very swiftly corrected it. But the fact that it wasn't a major issue is that's why so many people didn't call us. Normally it would have been inundated with calls from the media, but they didn't call because they just didn't believe it.
Doctor, very quickly before we go to the ad break, you were on the ground. You saw the dire straits of the situation there. What can you say that media hasn't reported on?
But they've done a great job. There's nothing I can say that they haven't done. They've shown the suffering of the people. They've shown non-violent people. They've shown how disciplined they are. They've commented on it outside them being a journalist, as a human being, commented on it, how patient the people were. They've seen the suffering, and they said, also off the record, many of them said, when I say off the record, I mean off the air, they said, food was really needed, these people really needed help. So the media have done everything. I can't fault them in any way from a human point of view in this last week.
All right, so thank you so much to Dr. Suleiman. Of course, we're going to leave it there for now. And when we return, we're going to discuss whether media coverage on the plea for Pierre Koki's release and the presidential inauguration was adequate. Join the conversation by calling us on +2 711 714 6843, 714 6847, 714 6857. And let us know which stories anywhere you are you feel were not adequately covered by the media. Share your views and comments on Twitter @SA Media Monitor, and of course like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. Don't go anywhere. We'll return shortly after this. Six minutes. Mayday. Mayday. There's something with this water. And I'm thirsty. I want water from the Swiss Alps. Thank you very Not the Zim Falls, no. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and you can be part of our discussion today by calling us and sending us tweets. In our next story, the release of an emotional video on Wednesday by the gift of the givers of Yolande Korki, wife of South African school teacher Pierre Korki, who is held hostage by an Al-Qaeda-linked kidnappers in Yemen, captured high emotions from viewers. Yolanda was appealing to Al-Qaeda to release her ill husband. It's almost a year since Pierre has been in the hands of his abductors. Let's take a look at this insert.
With the coming month of Ramadan, the month of mercy and forgiveness, we ask you to please have mercy on Pierre and release him unconditionally as you released me. Pierre has not harmed anybody. He's an innocent man and a respected teacher. My children and I long desperately for him.
All right, and remember, you can start calling us and sending us those tweets. Now, Doctor, all right, let's take a caller on the line. We've got Lauren on the line. Lauren, a very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us. Your comment, please. Lawrence, good morning to you, sir.
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
We're very well, thank you, sir. Please go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, I do have something to say regarding the... can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Lawrence. Please go ahead. Please turn down your TV set so we can hear you properly. Thank you, Lawrence.
I'm calling regarding the kidnapping.
Yes.
I just the thing which I want to know, the woman was first adopted by these people who were kidnappers, and then right now these people are they've managed at least to release the woman, and according to what the lady she's saying right now, she's asking for her husband, and then she's taking advantage of the Ramadan because of she understands that these people they might be Islamic, so. What we are trying to understand here is how, if she was firstly kidnapped, she might have an idea of what kind of people are this, and then how do they operate. The reason she's underlining the lines of Ramadan is that maybe these people are Muslims who might rethink on this situation and say, okay, let's take this guy out because of it's been a year and nothing is happening. You understand?
Yes, Lawrence. All right. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for your concern there. Now, Doctor, please take us through the latest developments in trying to negotiate for Mr. Korki's release.
From 17th of March, there has been no negotiations because that's the last we sent in Abiyan leaders to talk to Al-Qaeda. And of course, there was no fresh package to offer. At that stage, we tried to get him out unconditionally. They said, we can't do that. Because if we do that for one, we've got German, Dutch, American, Saudi, and we have to do the same for everyone else. Indirectly telling us it's not good for our credibility if we do that. They didn't say it in those kind of words. And then they said, you know what, they didn't give us any proof of life for Pierre, but they on their own volunteered. They said, first, Pierre is not in good health. And secondly, they said, if you give us the ransom, they didn't stipulate the figure at that stage. If you give us the ransom, you can have Pierre right now. The good thing about that discussion was, for the first time, they didn't ask for Anas to be handed over. And they never said, he stole our money. And nor did they put a timeline for the money to be brought in this time. They didn't set them to execute him. So from that point, we had no further dialogue. But in the third week of April, we were about to send the leaders back to talk to them. And exactly at that point, on 25th of April, an all-out war broke out in Yemen between the Yemeni army and Al-Qaeda. Now, in that kind of condition, you can't have meetings, you can't have negotiations, because people are moving. Actually, we got feedback that they saw the American hostage being moved, they saw the Saudi hostage being moved, And 4 days later, they saw Pierre being moved, as well as a hostage from the UN, of Sierra Leone nationality. People saw that in different sources, gave us that information, they were moved. And the other danger is, if you send somebody to talk to them, the bombs are falling all over, but the risk is they could say the people who are coming are spies for the government, and they may kill the negotiators going across. So under that circumstances,
it's a risky situation.
We can't
all
put people
around.
at risk, who are doing us a favor.
Now, panel, what do you feel? This story was relegated to the back burners. Why the sudden media interest? Gentlemen.
Well, I think, obviously, just to say that in terms of the coverage has certainly been poor. And I can almost guarantee that if this was a celebrity family, this story will be in the news almost every day. So there's the issue of Ramadan has been alluded to by the caller. And perhaps they're trying to take advantage of that and raise the interest in the story. But overall, I would say the coverage was really poor, or has been poor to date.
All right, let's take Bobby from Harare. Bobby, a very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us, sir. Your comment or question, please.
Morning, how are you?
We're very well, thank you, Bobby. Please go ahead.
Let me start by saying congratulations on the inauguration of your president.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Please go ahead.
And I should say well done, South Africa.
Thank you, Bobby. Go ahead with your comment, sir.
Right, my comment is on the miners' strike. I hope I'm not behind with that.
No problem, go ahead.
And you talked about the lifestyle audit on Matunja. I've been watching the miners' strike from the moment Marikana happened. And what I'm worried about on the editors and all these newspapers, why have they not dig down more on the hands-off position that the government has taken on this particular issue? What is the crucial point? There's a lack of leadership in resolving this position. And when you look at the figures being peddled around, we've got platinum here in Zimbabwe. And I don't think these figures cannot be affordable for the miners. 12,500 is about 1.2 US compared to us here. And I think they can afford that. It's all about how you manage other cost measures within the organization or the structures of your current cost management. So you decide where you want to put this figure and who must gain on it. They must worry a lot about the take-home positions of executives in management and what the workers themselves get home to go with. Because there's a balancing effect here. If you pay more on wages, so slow down on other privileges that take place. There are so many of them. Fuel consumption, benefits of traveling, entertainment. You need to cut down on a lot of things. Bonus payment, especially bonus payment to mine executives, are going to be cut down. You need to balance it up, and you need to cut down on that gap. And until the government is coming and said, no, look, we need to look after the poor. We need to look after the workers. We need to look after their benefits and how they move forward. There is no way they can be able to resolve this. In hindsight, 34 people died. And everyone is angry about this particular position. And they want to go and pursue their points in a fair way. And I think somewhere along the line, leadership is lacking. Why have they not taken government to task?
Thank you, Bobby. Issue? Thank you so much, Bobby, for your comment there. Bobby calling us from Harare, and of course, citing that the problem is, of course, the structure with the current management systems in terms of mines. And I think we delved into that point earlier on our panel. Let's quickly talk about this Korki story now. The family opted to use media as a pivotal point to actually create some noise. Do you feel that media attention has helped in any way to try and move the situation forward? Julian?
Well, I mean, there's two issues here. Getting back to your earlier thing about, the lack of coverage. I don't think it's necessarily poor coverage. I think it's a question of a story. There's no developments moving it along. We live in a world where the 24-hour news cycle, 24-second news cycle, quite frankly, is at play. So it is an issue. There's nothing keeping the story alive, as we would say, in a newsroom sense. The other thing, though, and I think, I do sometimes find it quite, to play devil's advocate for a minute, to find it a bit problematic that you have hostage negotiations taking place in the full glare of the media with blow-by-blow sort of updates on what's taking place. Because I think you can have a fairly dangerous situation developing where the hostage acquires more value to the hostage takers. there's value in the publicity, there's value also in, and a perceived value on their side in terms of, how much people might pay for this hostage. So, if it has gone a bit quiet, as long as the behind-the-scenes stuff is still going on, I don't know what the role at the moment, for instance, is the Department of International Relations. They've been very quiet too. We've seen this before in cases. There was the South African photographer Anton Hamel, who was killed in Libya. That story was in the headlines for a while. There was, delegations going to send, attempts to find his body. And then it just went dead. We've heard nothing in years, about that particular incident.
All right.
I have to make another comment here. And,
right,
and I hear what you're saying
Shani,
about the fact that, there's no developments around the story. But that's the whole purpose of investigative journalism.
Absolutely.
They're supposed to actually go out there and follow up and find out all the other
didn't know about
things
the
around the
details
story.
that they actually suspected that they were kidnapped by another group of kidnappers. We're only hearing these developments now, only when the attention is getting back there. And I'm sorry, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show today and putting the record straight and setting the record straight for everybody out there to know. Thank you so much, Doctor.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Of course, that is the CEO, the founder of the Humanitarian Aid Gift of the Givers, Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, talking to us today about the AMCU as well as the Korki story. In our next story now, South Africa's 5th Democratic Parliament held its first sitting on Wednesday morning as Chief Justice Mogoeng swore in 400 new members of the National Assembly. On Saturday morning, President Jacob Zuma was sworn in for his second term as the country's number one. All right, now, panel, let's delve into the Parliament. What is your general opinion about the coverage of the swearing-in ceremony? We know that Parliament has become a bit of a certain sensationalized interest we've seen with the State of the Nation address, where it's all about now the red carpet look and who's wearing what and who came with who. Please go ahead.
Well, it was interesting how the EFF, with only 20-something MPs, seem to have dominated the coverage about their red and their berets and their helmets and so on. So they certainly know how to play, the media, and they seem to have dominated the coverage, even though their representation is proportionally less than, say, the DA, for instance. Yeah,
all right. Let's take Bafanyana from Durban. Bafanyana, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the show. Your comment, please.
Good morning, Risha, and your guest.
Good morning, Bafanyana. Please go ahead.
Yes. No, I just wanted to check if it's possible for the media to probe or do the lifestyle of the directors of the mine. Maybe give us the profile as to who owns the mine, who are the directors of the mine, and how much they're getting, as compared to the demand that the strikers are demanding from the miners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bafanyana in Durban, saying, well, we need to probe the lifestyles of the mine owners, who they are as well. I think there's a lot of public uprising. People want to know why these people not able to afford to pay these miners this. People want to know how they're living. People want to generally basically see how these people think in terms of being human first and of course, being a profiter later. Let's continue with our swearing-in ceremony. Wellington, how did you find the coverage?
Look, for me, the thing is, it's mostly about the glitz and glamour.
Yes,
right?
Red carpet event. What about the politics?
Yeah, that's the thing. We know elections have come and they're gone. The swearing-in has come and it's gone. Mm-hmm. I think what's important now is starting to hold those people to account. What's going to happen? What are they actually going to do? How are they going to do it? Mm-hmm. These are the things that we need to keep on sustaining and we keep on moving with going forward.
All right, Julian. What did you think of the media coverage?
Well, I mean, I think, it was fairly obvious that the EFF would attract the bulk of the attention. There was a great photograph on the front page of the Star this week with Julius Malema and various EFF members lined up and President Jacob Zuma looking at them. And that look said volumes. But I think it gave Parliament's become rather staid. It's not parliamentary sittings and so on are not the kind of thing that tend to create some excitement among viewers or people, readers. And I think the injection of the EFF into that and the glitz and glamour around that livened it up a bit. I think we're in for a very, very interesting time.
Was the red carpet. All right, well, we're going to leave it there for now. And when we return, we're going to look at the coverage of the Malawian elections and, of course, the recent Boko Haram attacks in Nigeria. You can still be part of our discussion by expressing your views as to which stories you think should have been covered by the media by calling us on +2 711 714 6843, 714 6847 and 714 6857. You can also share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor and like our Facebook page. Stay with us. This is Media Monitor. Nigeria. Yeah, the red berets with the red carpet. That's why. Yeah, it was. And then they had a little gathering outside the parliament, and they were just in song. Yes, you can remove. This is the bottle he drank from.
That's cool.
Please don't fill me up. Quinica, Savias. Mr. Quinica, good morning to you, sir.
Morning, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. Please stay on the line. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and you can be part of our discussion by calling us on the numbers that will appear very shortly at the bottom of our screens. There they are. Not forgetting Facebook as well as Twitter. In our next story, Islamist militants Boko Haram are continuing to terrorize civilians in the northern and central parts of Nigeria. Now, this comes after they killed more than 50 civilians in 3 separate bombing attacks near the town of Chibok, where they kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls. Let's now welcome on the line Mr. Xavier Quinica, Africa editor at CAJ News, to shed some light into the Boko Haram saga. Mr. Quinica, very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Good morning.
Mr. Quinica,
thank you for inviting me to this.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, in your professional view, is the media doing justice to the story, and has that coverage been effective in any manner?
Can you phone again? The line is getting fed.
Mr. Quinica, in your professional view, all right, I think we seem to have lost Mr. Quinica on the line. We will try and certainly get back to him. But panel, the Boko Haram group seems to be giving the Nigerian state nightmares. Has the media fully probed the government about the plans to even try and get rid of this Boko Haram? Shani.
Well, I think the broader question that also needs to be asked is, what is the AU doing about this? We keep talking about the fact that we want Africa to solve African problems. Absolutely. And yet we're not hearing a lot in terms of what the AU is trying to do to intervene. We're hearing assistance being offered by the United States, even Israel and some European countries now. But where is the AU at this point in time? When certainly the media is not covering that, or they're not saying anything about the issue.
And I think we also know that the AU as an institution really doesn't have much clout or the resources to do anything much. But I think what's important for me is for media to cover the other side of things, where you say, who is Boko Haram?
Absolutely.
What do they represent? What is their agenda? Because we're not getting that. When these things come to the fore, it's mostly some of the international media that kind of try and explain these things, but it's often from their eyes and not the perspective of the people within the countries themselves.
All right. Julian, very quickly there before I go back to Mr. Quinica.
Well, I think there's been some very good coverage, primarily in the international media, not so much in the South African media. But you're looking at an issue that has been simmering for nearly a decade. In recent years, more than 2,000 people have been killed. This is not a new issue. The Twitter hashtag campaign has brought more focus on this issue, and the kidnapping of the schoolgirls has brought more focus on it. But this is hardly a new issue.
Thank you so much, Julian. Let's go back to Mr. Kunika. Mr. Kunika, the Boko Haram group seems to be giving the Nigerian state nightmares. Has the media fully probed the government about the plans to tighten security in the country?
The Nigerian government is trying its best to try and, protect the citizens. But now, with the escalation of the Boko Haram activities, it's becoming something that is difficult for the Nigerian government to control on its own. Hence, the invitation of the United Nations, America Security, France, and other international organizations to back up, the government's initiatives to fight these terrorist groups.
Now, Mr. Kunika, do you know if any journalist has ever tried to fully investigate the group Boko Haram, or maybe journalists are just in pure fear for their own lives?
I haven't, heard at the moment, but from our side, CAJ News at the moment, because of the increased, activities following, the abduction of more than 200 girls. We are trying to find out who is exactly financing Boko Haram. Because honestly, if you look at the costs of acquiring, guns, bullets, grenades, artillery, and all these things, you see that these people are not by themselves. There is a third force, a very powerful force behind them. So at the moment, I'm sure even the government is trying its best to find out who is exactly financing these people. Because right now, when it started, they were only concentrating on one province. But now, in Nigeria, we call them states. But now it has escalated from Adamawa, Borno, and now Yobe. There are 3 states now which is being controlled by Boko Haram. It shows how serious they are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kunika. We're going to have to leave it there. And that's, of course, Mr. Savias Kunika, Africa editor at CAJ News, shedding some light into the Boko Haram saga. In our next story, Malawian 5th general elections were held on Tuesday, May 20th in Malawi. And according to media reports, voters turned out in high numbers to elect a new president and parliament. The incumbent President Joyce Banda faced stiff challenges from a field of 12 candidates. Security forces were deployed to contain violence that broke out after delays in opening some of the polling stations. AU election observers led by former Namibian President Sam Nujoma declared the elections as free and fair. The Malawi Electoral Commission, the MEC, suspended the country's election announcement and ordered a recount of votes. Let's take a quick look at this clip.
The Election Commission has been trying to tally the numbers. They say their systems are failing, the technical systems, the computers, but the leadership is out there instigating disruption of the process. This should not be allowed to happen in this country. We've come too far for that. We're such a poor country that we cannot have that situation.
All I can say is that what they have seen is that I have brought out the best from inside me. I've run around, I've worked hard. Malawi is a better place than I found it. So but the decision to give me the mandate for another 5 years doesn't belong to me.
The opposition is aware there is no way they can win this election. Mind you, history has it that in Africa, a divided opposition has never won an election. So right from the word go, the opposition knew that they're not going to win these elections. That is why they came up with a lot of careless statements, senseless statements, just to instigate fear, to incite violence, to create anxiety among Malawians. Because the truth of the matter is, whatever the case, there is no way the opposition can win these elections. We are going to win, come hell or sunshine.
All right, and remember now you can start calling us and sharing your views on Facebook as well as Twitter. Panel, we've just had our elections. There was a lot of excitement around the elections. How did the South African media cover the Malawi elections, general elections? Did we get the background of, one, the political parties and the influence in the socio-economic and political landscape in Malawi? Julian.
Well, I think there's a broader issue here, and it's coverage in South Africa of Africa, of the continent.
African stories, yes.
And I think that, newspapers don't have budgets. I mean, I think something that has bothered me for quite some time is that, it's often the international media, the BBCs, the Guardians, the Globe and Mails, the New York Times, that take the lead on coverage of these international stories. And I think there's two reasons for this. One is the newspapers not having the budgets to cover those stories. The other one is this, South Africa, for as long as we can think, has had almost an exceptionalist approach to itself. That we're somehow different to the rest of the continent. And I think that's hugely problematic. We see it with the levels of xenophobia here.
True.
We see it with our lack of knowledge about what's going on the rest of the continent.
Very true, very true. Wellington?
And I think the thing for South Africa is this, that if you look at the way media in South Africa cover the rest of the continent, like Julian was saying, it's appalling, to say the least. And I think this is where the SABC should come in, because it's a public broadcaster. They do have the mandate to ensure that all people, all citizens really know what's going on. Because what has been happening with the Malawi issue is that you find South African media relying on breaking news stories.
From Reuters.
Yes, which is fine. It's okay to do that, but the challenge is sometimes you tend to form an opinion based on half-baked information.
Very
so
true.
the challenge for media there is to then follow up on that breaking news and giving it context. We don't know how the electoral system in Malawi works.
We don't even know anything. I didn't hear anything about the parties either that were participating.
We don't know
I only know about Joyce Banda.
And now we know of the confusion that's been happening now, her annulling the results. And then
her scandal the previous week.
All that stuff. We don't have the context to that. So I think media really needs to up their game regarding that.
Absolutely. All right. Let's take Lita in Eastern Cape. Lita, very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Hi, my name is Peter in Kosovo.
Peter, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us, sir. Your comment, please.
Yes, I've got a worry. Let's say I'm a bit worried about our media, but I don't know how do they operate media, because it seems as if they choose which places to go and cover, and who to target. Maybe I don't know the reason behind that. But I think they should actually go into the urban areas like Kosovo, but there are many stories that they can cover here instead of like going far away in the, maybe let's say, urban. Can I talk about OAU?
Go ahead, Peter.
All right. Also, I think this organization, people in Africa or leaders in Africa, they don't like it or support it, because if they actually seem like now they don't have power, they are overtaken by the foreign overseas countries. If they were willing to do something with the organization, they should actually be investing, because I suppose they do have money or they do have resources, but they don't want to invest in it. So maybe somehow they should actually rethink about it in terms of what their objectives are.
Thank you so much, Peter from the Eastern Cape. Panel, very quickly, are you aware of any medium where South African media liaises directly with any of these African countries to make sure that the substance, the reports that they give out are actually quite factual and correct? Shoni?
Well, we're seeing some of our media begin to do that. Obviously, if you look at, for instance, the report given by Deborah Patta of CBS on what is happening at Boko Haram, first of all, it was interesting how she said it was very easy for her to get hold of a Boko Haram person. Apparently, these people are part and parcel of the society, and everybody seems to know who they are.
But not as it may, is being said.
It seems, instead of this whole, reporting, through a briefcase where you jet in with your whatever notebook and then you jet out, they're beginning to establish networks where they can actually get more substantive coverage of what is happening on the ground.
Thank you very much. And we're going to leave it there for that story. And stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to look at the media coverage of the Brazil 2014 FIFA World Cup protests. Tell us, which stories do you think should have been scrutinized by the media but received less or no coverage at all, by calling us on +2711 714 6847, 714 6843, 714 6857. You can also share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, as well as on Facebook. Don't go anywhere. We return shortly after this. Yeah, what are they?
They're connecting.
Mr. Dube, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
Now, you, Alicia, I'm well, thanks.
Ngiyaphila bhuti wami, siyabonga ukusijoyina kwi-show today.
No, not the problem.
But Christopher, where are you in the area so we can put ukuthi usifonela kuphi?
Kempton Park.
Use Kempton Park, so Gauteng.
Yeah.
Okay, please stay on the line, Mr. Dube.
Yeah, all right.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and you can be part of our discussion today by contacting us on the numbers that will appear shortly at the bottom of your screens, not forgetting Facebook as well as Twitter. In our next story, with just less than 20 days before the Brazil 2014 Soccer World Cup kicks off, the country has been hit by a wave of protests that has led to chaos. Brazilians are threatening to boycott the World Sporting event, accusing the government of wasting billions of rands on the tournament that will not benefit the poor. By this time in 2010, South Africa was heavily criticized by international media of not being ready to host the tournament, citing a high rate of crime, among other things. Joining us on the line, as promised, is Mr. Christopher Dube, editor of Diski 360, to shed us a bit of information in terms of the saga going on in Brazil. Mr. Dube, very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us on the show.
No, thank you for having me.
Now, Mr. Dube, the World Cup is about to start in 18 days' time. What do you think about the media coverage leading up to the sporting phenomenon?
Well, if you were to do a Google on World Cup 2014, the word you'd find most is protest. It's being unlike when we hosted it and the international media was telling us there's a plan B and what. This time the media is focusing on protests that are actually happening. Something is happening in Brazil, and it's rather surprising we haven't read anything about a plan B, because we actually read it about something that is happening. There are protests, there are people dying on the construction sites. It doesn't look like it's going to be as ready as we were. By this time last year, I think everything was in place in South Africa. This time we still have the opening game in Sao Paulo. The stadium itself still has a few touch-ups that still need to be done. So the media coverage has been on the protests that have been happening in and around Brazil, which are true. They are actually happening. There isn't as much media focus on actually the construction that is going on. How are the volunteers or stuff like that around the actual World Cup? All the coverage is on these people that are outside burning tires and toying and all that.
But panel, I just want to quickly ask you here. We hosted the World Cup in 2010, and I think South Africa is labelled as a third world country, and Brazil somewhat a bit more beneficial, well, been a bit more better off than us. But we get very fast-moving highlights again. Is it our background that determines how media reports on stories? Very important question.
Look, that's an interesting question, because what Brazil is reminding us is what happened in 2010,
Absolutely.
or in the lead up to the 2010 World Cup. Now, yes, it's one thing. Media reports what society is like, and also society affects what media reports. But I think for Brazil, what's interesting for me is that if you look at the coverage, it's too simplistic from the way I see it, because often you see that it's protest against the levels of inequality, for instance, in Brazil, right? And also the cost of the stadiums. But what does it actually mean to say the cost of the stadium? How much is it? And how does that impact on the ordinary person? And also, if you say the levels of inequality are high, what are the kind of issues that are really affecting people to the point of having them to take up arms and go into the streets
to protest?
That is missing. Which is quite sad, but I guess it's something that is not new, because we have seen that even in 2010.
Let's go back to Mr. Dube. Mr. Dube, now, from the preparation aspect of the biggest tournament worldwide, is Brazil ready to welcome the world into Brazil?
I mean, look, it's as ready as it will ever be. It's you know, when media reports on these things, we always tend to look at negative more than positive. If you go deeper and you see the way that the FIFA media has been covering it, I think it's the only positive. Again, in 2010, you had to look at our local media to find the positive. If you go international, that's where you get the negative. In this case, as usual, CNN and the rest will jump on the negative. If you go on the FIFA media, you actually see that most of these stadiums are very, very, very ready. And the ticket sales alone tell you that a lot of people are going into Brazil. So yes, it is ready in terms of the infrastructure and whatever else. You know, like what's his name, Falk mentioned to everybody, and he keeps saying it's only the supporting little huts that have to be built there, you know, where your media sits, where your volunteers eat, where your VIPs land. It's not the actual pitch on the ground that has to be dug up or whatever. It's ready. Everything is as ready as it will ever be. And I think it will come back again after like 2010. After it happened, everybody was happy. Everybody was smiling as the tournament went on. I don't see it going to be as horrible as it looks now in the media.
Thank you so much. And of course, that is Christopher Dube, editor of Diski 360, just shedding a bit of light in terms of the World Cup that's happening in Brazil. South Africa shared the same criticism around this time. People were protesting about the very same issues. And of course, well, we're seeing very little coverage concentrating on the negative aspects of things. After the break, we get to read your tweets and also discuss which stories the analysts think should have made headlines but didn't, and what they anticipate will be the most talked about topics for this coming week. You can still share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, as well as on Facebook. Don't go anywhere. We return shortly after this. Facebook's Gift of the Givers are doing a great job at Marikana. Negative stories will always be there. This is a humanitarian issue. Thank you. I hope the ones you crossed out are not going to appear there. What are they saying about us? Because I've never known that. Welcome back. Of course, this is our final segment of Media Monitor, where we get to make our loyal viewers very, very famous right here by reading out some of the tweets that you've sent us in regards to the topics that we've been discussing today. Let's see what some of our viewers have written to us. Let's see. Do we have Bright Eye there? Gift of the Givers, that's N Tsobololo, says Gift of the Givers are doing a great job at Marikana. Negative stories will always be there. This is a humanitarian issue. And Ntsobololo, thank you so much for your tweet there. Nkatego Nkuna says, call the army. We need to save people's lives at all costs. Breadwinners are being killed. Nkatego Nkuna for your comment. Thank you very much. Mokabu Gimahlako says, any initiation to keep peace is welcome. The situation is tense not to take action. Any initiation to keep peace is welcome. Thank you so much for your comment there. At Selo Mahalwa says, after 2 days inauguration, I have a great feeling that we'll take our #1 spot back in Africa. Carol Mtak says, ridiculous extravagance in the light of the state of healthcare, education, housing, and hungry people. Last but not least, Prince Sam says, another 5 years of complaints from the public, more looting, corruption, increased e-toll fees, higher unemployment. Prince, thank you so much. And last but not least, there is Ralph Mateka, says Jonathan has incredible capacity to ignore the reality on the ground in Nigeria. He is gifted in that. Levi, with statements like this, they are threatening to disturb peace and also to subvert the democratic will of the people. Thank you so much to all our viewers for your profound comments there. Now, what I want to know from my panel before we go into what's going to be leading this week, what do you think about the Bucks players posing naked and going very viral in a couple of minutes? Is this an issue of morality or what's going on?
Well, I just think that if Pirates wants more media coverage, they should just win the league. This is a cheap stunt.
Wellington, what do you think?
Look, given that it wasn't put in the public domain on the basis that they wanted it to be there, I think there is a problematic issue there around ethics in terms of media coverage.
So the boys must really check out who takes their pictures when they're not really dressed. Julian, what do you think of this?
Up the Bucks.
Back naked. All right, now let's talk about what you anticipate will be the leading stories this week. Let's start with you, Shani.
Well, clearly the inauguration, how much it cost us, and obviously who's in and who's out in terms of our cabinet. That will be the main focus during the week.
And also the announcement of cabinet in the next couple of days as well.
Absolutely.
Wellington.
And I think more than that, what I would want media to start doing is to start holding politicians to account, because all has been done now. Now it's time to deliver. So we need to follow up and we need to hold them to account on all the promises that they have made from the campaigns all the way to the inauguration to where we are until we get to the next election.
Thank you very much, Wellington, Radio. Julian.
I think the focus will be on the cabinet. Are we going to have the same sort of bloated cabinet that's trying to deal with the various factions within the ANC? What is going to be done about that? City Press has got a nice pull out today of the promises that the president made in his inauguration speech. What's going to be done to create those 6 million job opportunities, to give people universal access to water? That's beginning now. That's the starting point now. How will he use that term? More broadly, I think the fallout from Malawi, from the election, and the continuing Boko Haram issue.
But, panel, how should media then make themselves useful in holding those politicians accountable? In terms of now, when the cabinet starts, we're really following them around to say, listen, you said we're implementing this. What's going on? We should be really running after them. How else can they do that, Shani?
Well, one of the things, it just shows that I think the media have sort of...
Needs to be proactive, man. They wait for stories to happen, and then because it's on Reuters, everybody wants the same carbon copy of the same story, not even giving it a little bit of oomph, exactly as it is.
Absolutely. And I think we definitely need to see more proactiveness within the newsrooms in terms of, okay, you promised us X, Y, Z, and we're not seeing it. It's year 2 down the line. Because there's some really wonderful promises by the president at his inauguration yesterday.
But don't you think, panel, that the fact that media is not reporting these stories, especially print media, is giving us the same account of the same story? Isn't that why people are moving to more the digital aspect of life, where you can actually, you get live updates as they happen? Why should I buy a newspaper that everybody has the same front page story on? Don't you think this is a threat to print media?
I mean, while it is a threat, I think it is also an opportunity for media not
to find new ways to captivate their readers.
Not to just rely on breaking news, but giving context to those issues, because I would rather buy a City Press story or a City Press newspaper on the basis that it's giving me context and analysis to those issues that everyone and anyone can actually tweet about.
No, I think the role of newspapers is changing, and the context is vital, and that's the role that they're going to play. Breaking news, you'll get it online, you'll get it on your phone, you'll get it wherever. And then, obviously, I run a fact-checking website, a political fact-checking website. Media groups like that are springing up. We have, dozens of them springing up all over the world. The idea is to hold politicians and public institutions to account, to track the promises that they make, see if they live up to those, and to interrogate the claims that they make in public. So I think there's a growing role. I think we're living in an incredibly exciting time from a media perspective.
But people are just not taking advantage of those opportunities. Panel, thank you very much. You've been so insightful today on the show. And of course, our viewers' contributions and suggestions is highly valued. You can email us your views about the show at mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. Share your views and comments on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/mediamonitor. Please like our page. You can also follow us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. Thank you so much for watching Media Monitor today. Join us again next week, same time, same place. All local, all global, all the time. That is SABC News. And of course, for myself, Alicia Jali, and the rest of the QTV team, have yourself a blessed Sunday and a wonderful Africa Day. Goodbye.